Hey class, welcome back to Social Work PRN with Sherry. We're going to talk a little bit in this segment about termination. Um, it's not something we talked about in the fall semester as we were talking about assessments and forming an alliance with a client, but as we terminate, our alliance comes to an end. So um, tell us a little bit about termination. What do you think are the key points, a couple of key concepts?
Well, first, I think you have to introduce the idea of termination, or I like to call it more about transitions, because sometimes it is just about a transition
Right,
from
right.
one phase to another, and to start discussing it early on in your work with your client, whether it's in a hospital setting or an outpatient setting or wherever that means, and you want to of course talk about termination in the sense that they know they have options after you terminate. It could be an episode of service where they can return and come back, and if they ever need services again, that you're not leaving them completely, but you're moving on because you've had success, or you've met the goals you've attained. I think it's really important if um, that we don't ever terminate with a client prematurely, or if there's a
Yeah,
situation
absolutely.
that there's a rub or a non-fit with a client, by one way or the other, is that we don't abandon ever our clients. We talk about that a lot actually at Social Work PRN, because technically um, we may leave a work setting and leave clients, so we have to talk about making sure that when we transition to a different place, that we do it appropriately, make sure that they have all the resources they need. But I think it's really just most important to enter it in your discussion from day one.
Some of the research on transition um, is pretty clear. The better that you do, the less likely that they will slip and fall back.
Mm-hmm.
So when a patient ends up at a hospital and all they get is a sheet of paper with some phone numbers on it, the likelihood that they're going to have a slip up or a fallback is really high, as opposed to somebody that takes the time to really formulate
Yeah,
a transitional plan. It improves, it decreases that recidivism rate. So pretty important stuff.
yeah,
So,
I would agree.
all right, thank you,
All right,
Sherry.
great.
Hey class, welcome back. We're on section 5 talking about termination. Um, how many times do you see a client here at Children's Mercy in the medical clinic? I mean, um, do you, I would imagine some of them you see once or twice, maybe others you see multiple times, depending on the presenting medical issue. So what does termination look like?
About on a monthly average, I see anywhere from 80 to 140 patients or clients. Out of those, certain determinations of their level of care, their acuity, as far as the resources they have, determine how they'll be followed. Will it be followed weekly? Will it be followed monthly? Will it be followed at all after that? So determination of termination comes from the level of care or their level of their not just their and I want to use this in the right context, level of functioning in the sense of their environment, um, the need in which it needs to be addressed, and then also the motivation to doing so. So if I have a parent or a family who has DCF involvement, termination will look a lot longer down the line in the sense of meeting the goal of ending an investigation, creating a new homeostasis that doesn't involve the reason for the potential investigation. When we have families that are like teen parents, that's gonna termination kind of comes into their ability to meet their goals of taking care of the child, knowing how to take care of the child, ensuring the child has all their needs, their basic needs met. I think when it comes to termination here at Children's, I utilize Maslow's hierarchy of needs to determine to make sure that basic needs are met, to ensure that social needs that will always be kind of ongoing, that the family can continue that process on their own. The only aspect of termination, really, when it comes to follow-up, has to do more with their ability to have a homeostasis that it has to do with the changes that they needed to make, or making sure that they had the needs addressed that they came in with.
I really like the point you hit on early. Class, when we talk about termination in class, termination may not always be completely terminated or transitioning out of services, but maybe a step down from acuity of care. I liked how you said that quite a bit. Because you might have a patient, their child has a health need that's pretty acute, but then it gets better, so then they step down. So you're not seeing them, but you make them, like a baton, like, in a 4x4 relay race, you're passing the baton on.
Absolutely.
So they're terminating with you, but that doesn't mean they're terminating, they're just transitioning, stepping down. So I think that's a great way to think about that. So thank you, Cecil, appreciate it.
No problem.
Hey class, welcome back. We're here with Liz, and we're going to talk about termination and transitioning of clients. Why is termination an appropriate clinical skill? Why is it so important?
I think it's a way to say to a client, you've made some really great progress and you have the skills now to handle future situations that come up. It kind of gives them that confidence, or it gives the parent that confidence that they're able to help and support their child in the way that they need, or they now have the parenting skills they need when it comes to court and reunifying with their children in their home.
Yeah, it can be a time of celebration.
Mm-hmm.
I've had clients not want to terminate because they're comfortable in that relationship, but I also don't want to create a dependency. So we have to celebrate the changes that they've made. So it can be a time of celebration, but it could also be it wasn't the right fit. I've had clients where I wasn't the right guy for them. Did you have opportunities like that where you just knew it wasn't you weren't the right clinician? And if so, how did you facilitate, a transfer or discharge at that point?
I think for me, it's been more of the work or the assistance you need is outside of my scope of experience or practice. And so just being really honest with them that they need a different type of support than I have the skill set to do, and that I just want what is best for them. So it isn't a rejection of them, it's more of an area of growth that I need to have, or I just want to make sure they're getting the care they need. And so I think in those cases, framing it like that is helpful for them and makes them feel like they're being supported and
Right.
moving to.
Because I think it's really important in those instances that it's not them, it is us, because we don't want them to feel judged. And so we have to be aware of our competencies. I thought that was a really great point that you hit on. So thank you. All right, thanks, class. Hey, welcome back, class. We're moving on. We're going to talk about termination. What's the average length that you see clients here at Creative Connections?
It just really depends. 6 months to a year.
All right.
That's typical.
And then we compare that to your time at Rosebrooks. It wasn't 6 months to a year.
No, that would be 1 day to a couple weeks, or
Yeah.
if I could get up to 6 months, and that was a triumph.
I know I have talked with another social worker in a segment, the difference between voluntary and involuntary clients.
Yes.
Here, most of your clients are voluntary. I'm guessing they're here
Yes.
because they want to be here. Not that there isn't one that the divorce hearing has said they need therapy or, but for the most part. But over on the other side, when you were at Rosebrooks, you had a lot of involuntary clients that weren't always there. And sometimes they were there
they were
voluntarily, but
they were still
they had so many
volunteer.
pressures on
Yeah.
them.
I think it was more they were in survival mode and weren't able to come outside of that survival modes, which made it harder to open up about these harder things or to notice different parenting things that were happening or different concerns because they were just trying to live day to day and weren't thinking about things more in the future sometimes.
So when do you start preparing a client for termination?
Day one.
Day one. Yeah.
Yeah, I just let them know, like, hey, we're not going to be hanging out forever. You know, our goal is for you to build up these skills so where you can fire me or say goodbye to me. So we can celebrate those things. And we go over those treatment goals. And I let them know, I want you to be like, hey, you're fired when you're done.
Not because you did a bad job.
No, not because I did a bad job, but just because, like, I want to give them that power to know that, hey, I'm good right now, and to leave the kind of the door open to when, if they might need it again, then they know what to expect and what it was like and the control that they had in the process.
That is, that's perfect. So thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thanks, class. Hey class, we're back with Amy at her private practice. Something that I forgot to mention, and I think I should have mentioned it in the first segment, why social work and a little bit about her practice, but I think it works good here in the termination section. So Amy has, in private practice, she will see clients short term, she will see clients long term, and that's the client that was mentioned a little bit in the change segment. And then she sees clients in sort of the mid-range. And one of the things that Amy has negotiated is a relationship with Quick Trip, of all places. And she sees patients or clients that are employees of Quick Trip, and they are allotted 5 sessions per issue because Quick Trip does all of their healthcare in-house. It's kind of a really they have found it to be an effective way to keep their employees happy and healthy, and they'll stay there and work longer and work harder for them.
Mm-hmm.
What is termination like when you're only going to have 5 sessions with a client versus a client that we started talking about in the change section? And we'll maybe get back to her. Is termination different, or is it the same? Or do you start thinking about termination on day 1 when you start your intake?
It'd probably be more like day 2. Day 1 is about finding out all the information that we need to find out. And then termination can be on session 5, it can be, or session 3 if that's appropriate. It could be about a referral process. So someone may come in pregnant, stressed out that they're pregnant, but at the same time they need a referral over to someone that's outside of the Quick Trip organization, and I get the authorization code and get that ready for them. And I don't know any more about that. I mean, it is sometimes people want to come back and see me, and they can come back and see me at 5 sessions. If they want to come back, they have to use their insurance.
One of the things that I like about termination, and this is, I think, part of what is best practice in termination, and that is we don't just see clients longer than we need to see them. We're not paid best pals and friends for clients. We're there to work on a life, work on an issue, work on a goal, and we don't just see them forever, which kind of gets us to this client we talked about a little bit in the change section. You've worked with her for over a year, and she has made some great progress, and she's ready to terminate. But she is struggling with termination because it could be a loss. It could be the loss in her mind of the relationship she has with you. So how is that going? How is that process going with that client? Slow and bumpy, or smooth, or you're just taking it one session at a time?
When I feel that termination is going to be the best timing, she comes in and sabotages it. At first I thought maybe it was just a coincidence, but it's every time. So that is something I'll be talking to Gray about today.
Yeah, we're going to have lunch when we're done, so yeah.
So what makes it hard for this client too is that she has a lot of loss in her family. I mean, in her life throughout her whole. I mean, throughout her life that started when her father passed away when she was very young. So I know that is contributing a lot to exactly why she doesn't want to terminate here.
Yeah, I certainly have seen clients um, sabotage or try to throw a wrench, and really it boils down to loss. Um, if I've had a lot of natural loss in my life and now I might lose my therapist, what does that mean? And um, and loss is really interesting. We will terminate class at the end of the semester. I won't be your teacher next year. For some of you, that might be yes, we get rid of him, and others of you it might be I liked him. He was better than average. But in the end, it's still loss,
Mm-hmm.
right? And loss is a natural part of everything that we do. Even when Amy and I finished supervision, there was that discussion of, are we really done with each other? And the answer is no, I'll always be there, if you need me. And today I needed her, and so here I am videoing. So thank you so much for visiting with my class about a couple subjects. Um, I know that they will really appreciate it. So
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, welcome back, class. We're here with Stacy out in the cloud and technology and the ionosphere. So we're going to talk in this fifth segment about termination with clients. By the time the students see this video, they will have already heard from me in class that preparation and planning for termination really starts at day one when you're doing your assessment. You don't wait till the very end. Now, granted, sometimes we would go to court with a kid and we had no idea that the kid was going to get released that day. And then that day, the judge, for whatever reason, released that kid, and we had done no discharge planning. And you could really see the kid was excited to go home, but also sad to leave behind friends or staff that he had become, friends with. And there wasn't that discharge planning. We weren't able to plan for it. Mm-hmm. So we would always try to accommodate that, but it didn't always work. So why is termination and discharge planning, why is it so critical to the work we do?
Well, again, I'm probably gonna use a different analogy on this one, but if we think about the differences in grief and how we grieve for things, when we know somebody's dying, and I would say dying in grief, when we know somebody is dying, we plan for it differently than when somebody suddenly dies and we don't have the opportunity to plan for it. And those that grief process after those two different deaths are very different because of that, because we've had closure, we've had the opportunity to let the person know how much they mean to us. Granted, we should probably be doing that every day, no matter what is going on, because we don't know when that, for that analogy. Whereas in our scenario with a client, we start there, and we really need to start from that position of what closure is like from the beginning, to give that gift to them so that they have that, we know they're going to have that closure, and also to give that to ourselves, because I've had several scenarios where, even though I started termination at the beginning as a regular routine part of the process of, we're going to work together for this period of time, and I'm not always going to be here with you, and you're going to go on into the ideas that you go on into the world and take the things we've worked on together and grow. I had a scenario once where I had to stop seeing a family because my vehicle was involved in a crime outside of the client's house during a session. And so I had to make the decision to terminate without being able to terminate with that client, but to terminate their services. And it was one of the hardest, and I had it was a decision that I had to make afterwards, and it had to do with my own personal safety
Absolutely.
feelings
Absolutely.
versus like, how was I going to, because my suspicion was, it was one of the there were 2 clients in the home I was seeing, that one of the clients was actually who
Broke into the car.
broke, they were trying, they were trying to bash a window in my car. And so because of my own fear that was instilled with that,
Sure.
I had to look at that from an ethical perspective too. So I had to make the decision on that particular client to terminate without giving them the opportunity to terminate with me because of what was going on. So it's not always as cut and dried, but it was a really good thing that I had started termination from the beginning, because at least they had the knowledge that eventually we weren't going to be working together. Now,
Well,
the hard part for me was I wasn't able to give them that closure that they needed because of what happened.
right. So this thought just popped into my head, and at some level, when we see a client for 50 minutes or an hour, and you look at your phone, you see what time it is, you go, oh, you got 5 minutes. So we start wrapping up. We don't go on another 15 minutes. I mean, we can if it's a crisis and they're suicidal and they won't commit to safety. But usually we're looking at our phone. We go, we got 10 minutes, 5 minutes. We start wrapping it up. We are doing little miniature terminations at that point. And really, the other argument is it's really all about having good boundaries, which means it's really about best practice. Wouldn't you agree?
I would agree. And I like that description of the mini terminations, because, on one hand, that's a good thing because it shows them that you wrap up an encounter. And that each time, and if you think about the history that many clients potentially have with relationships,
Right.
and they may have had a lot of relationships where people do just they terminate their relationship with them without, any closure, and they just disappear in their life. They haven't been given access to that healthy, let's wrap up now. I'll see you again next Tuesday at 9:00.
Right.
They haven't been given that consistency. And so we're showing them the consistency as well as the boundaries. And so I think that's a really good thing that we're showing that over time.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you, Stacy. I'm going to go ahead and wrap this segment up. I appreciate it. And thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Hey class, welcome back. We're here with Lindy at Avila University, and we're going to talk about termination. So this is foundation, second semester, so obviously we will start talking about termination about halfway through. It's part of the syllabus. But in all reality, I think you and I would both agree, termination planning starts way before
Right.
The last 5 weeks of a semester.
Right.
So why is termination such an important process that we should put as much into it as we do assessment?
Yeah. I actually think it might be one of the most important parts of the plan change process, because many of our clients, and I think Western culture in general, doesn't handle leaving very well. And so if I was going to rewrite all the textbooks, I would change termination, that word, to leaving well, because I think that it's more of a graduation, and termination has so many bad connotations.
Right,
It's like
leaving
killing the
well,
relationships.
graduating, those are things to celebrate.
Yeah, exactly.
You came here, we worked on your sobriety, you've got 30 days, that's amazing. Let's celebrate that rather
Absolutely.
than terminate, like Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Like kill off the relationship.
Yeah.
And I think there's such a loss in that. Even if I've seen a client one time, in our agency, closure was huge, that we if a client didn't show up, we couldn't just close the case. We had to write a letter, make some attempt to contact. It wasn't like stalking behavior, but it was that need to end in a pointed way. And so I always talk about leaving well. I also think it gives the client, so a couple things, what you mentioned in another interview about retaining change. And so it's really important at that stage, 4 or 5 weeks ahead, what did change, what needs to continue in order to maintain that change, and really spelling that out. When I would see clients who maybe saw somebody else, another helper for 5 or 10 years even, and say, okay, so what worked, what changed? And so many of them couldn't articulate anything. And again, I really don't want to be that social worker. I want my clients to say, well, I changed this, and this is a key I learned I have to do. I want that to be able to be talked about. So I think that's important. And then I think it gives the worker the opportunity to validate the importance of the relationship for them. I mean, I can still remember many of my clients from 35 years ago. And of course, there's, very unique clients that always stand out in your mind. But each one of those was a real relationship to me. And I think that, it's a point in the relationship where that leveling can really happen. I'm human, I learned some things from you. They learned some things from me, and it was a cool thing. And so I like to look at it more like that. And then so many clients have been abandoned in really bad ways.
Right.
And this gives the opportunity to model that, especially youth. I was so conscious with my staff when I supervised that, if you make an error, own it with that kid, because you are going to be maybe the first person as an adult to do that. And I think those are curative things right in and of themselves. So I love that termination phase. I think it's important to have the close, that this isn't, we're not going to be friends. We're not going to hang out. This is a contracted time frame, and to punctuate it. And then the other thing I do is let my client know, being in the agency for 18 years, this worked. I could say, drop me a line or give me a call to tell me how things are going well.
Absolutely.
And not just when they were having another problem. And we kind of looked at recidivism in families as a positive thing, because they could come in to early prevent something before it.
Because they already
got
have that
out of hand.
alliance, they already have that
relationship.
trust.
Yeah.
So to come in when things just got a
Yeah.
little rocky. You said something really important. You said sometimes, if you only see a client one time. Well, in the fall in foundation, we talk a lot about assessments.
Mm-hmm.
And then in foundation second semester, we talk about that alliance and treatment planning and termination. Very basic. It's not clinically driven. But you see a client one time, you're still doing the beginning, the middle, and the end. You're still doing
Absolutely.
an assessment, you're still providing an intervention, and then you're leaving well.
Yes.
Whether, for me being at Gillis, I might have, 9 months to be with a kid and
Yeah.
a family, but I'm still doing the same process. Whether you see a client one time or over the course of 9 months,
Absolutely.
the steps are the same,
Yeah.
and they should be.
And I think that gives a guide. I talk with students about that same thing. It's going to have a beginning, middle, and end in every session, as well as the broad scope. And so again, if you're lost in a session, you're asking assessment questions, but then what's going to happen next? Well, where are you at in your hour session? And are you at the middle point? Do you have enough information? What's going to happen next time? Are you at the point where you need to leave well? And not just
That's
end,
right.
oh, we're out of time. Give yourself, I always leave 10 minutes, which means I run into an hour and 15-minute session a lot. But I want that 10 minutes at the end to close properly, so that it's not, I've been a client. To have somebody interrupt your story and say, sorry, we're out of time, I'll see you next week, is devastating. And so I think we need to care more about that.
Absolutely. Every session has an ending.
Absolutely.
So it's a huge part of what we do.
Yeah.
So thank you so much.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you very much. Hey class, welcome back. We're here with two of my favorite people, and we're going to visit a little bit with them about termination. I have tried to terminate with these people, and they won't. They have said,
It's not gonna happen.
It's not going to happen. I'm in your life forever. Gray."
Forever.
So that's exciting. Woo! So, and every single week we hear about the Ohio State. So, yeah, woohoo! So, why is termination so key? And I think for both of you, not that you want to talk about it, but you have been a client in the past, Tomas, at the VA, but you terminate, you finish doing what you do, so you've experienced it on the client end, and then you do it on the practitioner end. So why is termination such a key thing, and why is it we shouldn't neglect?
Well, I think termination, at least from my experience, is different because all the clients are different. The relationship's
Oh
different.
man, that's excellent.
The relationship's different.
Every termination is different because every client is different. That is really powerful.
And obviously every relationship's different, a part of that. So I mean, I know we've talked about this supervision. I know it is a process. Now, does that always happen? It doesn't, unfortunately, because if the client, if you change jobs, or something happens, the client stops coming, or whatever the case is. So I know the process is important, but it's not always easy because of the different situations and scenarios.
Right. What are your thoughts there?
I think that as you practice, termination begins at the admission.
Okay, that's important too.
Yeah. And you go into your practice talking about termination. The first day I met you, hi, let the client talk to you about who they are, and you tell the client what the goals are, or the client tells you what the goals are, and then you begin to tell the client, well, we can reach your goals, and we'll try to reach your goals in 8 weeks, because in 8 weeks we're going to terminate you. This is the span of time that we have to
So
terminate
in your
you.
current position at the VA and the job readiness, do you have parameters like that with clients?
Yes.
You can serve them for 8 weeks or
Yes.
6 weeks, and then at the end of that,
You're terminated. So we go in the current job that I'm in, we go in. If you live at the CWT transitional resident, you have up to 1 year. So we let the client know you have up to 1 year to be in our program. Each year, each month, or every 2 months, we have benchmarks to meet, because you have 1 year to be in the program. If you are living in your own place, then we have 6 months to work this program. We have benchmarks to meet within that 6 months, because at the end of 6 months, you should be engaged in competitive employment, and you should be done with our program. So it begins at the beginning rather than at the end or in the middle. In the middle, we should be looking at our treatment plan to see whether or not what goals we've met, encouraging the vet if we need to drop goals, set new goals
So
within that time.
Those little reviews are like little mini treatment conferences or treatment reviews, and then you're looking at your objectives. You were calling them benchmarks. You're looking at your objectives, and then reevaluating your treatment plan. If you've got to drop a goal or add a goal or whatever,
Or
tweak
say
a goal.
this goal doesn't work for me. Let's look at another goal, and we move forward that way. But at the end of 6 months, if you're living in the community, we're done. You need to be in competitive employment. And so we're pushing you along the way. Termination is very important. You should not keep a veteran or a client for 5, 10, 15, 20 years, and they should be your client.
Yeah.
You're not
Someone once said to me, to see someone consistently for 5 or 10 years, at some point it becomes a relationship, not a social work relationship. It
Right.
becomes something else.
Exactly.
So, all right. Well, thank you, class. I appreciate it. Thank you, guys.